Hi, this is a presentation of DHCP for IPv6. When we are using DHCP, we are using it to obtain an IP address automatically. When we're using IPv6, giving or setting up a host address could be done within the IPv6 protocol, which means that we can generate the address automatically by using the MAC address, because in IPv6 with the 128-bit address, the 64-bit host address can be generated from the MAC address, which is 48-bit. So what we need to obtain automatically is the networking prefix and other information, for instance the DNS and other things that we need to set up on the client to have access to the network and, for instance, the internet. So there are different ways of doing this in IPv6. One of them is using something called Stateless Address Autoconfiguration, or SLAAC. SLAAC uses IPv6 or ICMP version 6, something called router solicitation and router advertisement, which means that we can ask the router what is the network prefix and what is the prefix length. And then the router will answer back and tell the client. And since the client then can generate their own host address, well then they have actually what they need. In general, we can see here that this is how it will work. We need to enable IPv6 unicast routing first of all. That's something we need to do whenever we want to use IPv6 on a router. So here the client will ask, I need a router advertisement from the router, and it is sent out as a multicast to all IPv6 routers. This has a specific multicast address. The router will then find this address and answer back. Here is the prefix length, and other information. And then it will say, okay, I generate my ID, my interface ID, and then I use the prefix and the prefix length to create my IPv6 address. And then it will ask the router, is this IP version address already in use? Just to make sure that nobody else is using it. And then the router can say no, and then everything is working. This is one option, but we have two options more, because we can use the router advertisements and combine it with a DHCP server. Because if we want, for instance, the domain name to be handed out, if we want the DNS server and other information to be handed out, this can be taken care of by a DHCP version 6 server. Or I can have the third option, and that is to use the DHCP version 6 server for everything, also for giving the entire IP address to the clients. This is called a stateful DHCP version 6 DHCP server. Whereas if I use both the router advertisements and the DHCP server, this is called a stateless DHCP version 6. So it uses both SLAAC and DHCP version 6. So how do we see the different options? We're using something called the M flag and the O flag when we are using SLAAC. If both of them are set to 0, well then we will know that we don't have any information from a DHCP version 6. So this is the first option, where I'll only use the information that I get through the router advertisements. If I want both the IP version 6, if I want both the SLAAC and the DHCP, I set the M flag to 0 and the O flag to 1. This means option 2 with a stateless DHCP server. I use the command router or IP version 6 ND other flag config to set these flags. The last one, if I want everything to be taken care of by the DHCP server and I want to use the stateful option, well, then I set the M flag to 1. Then that means, okay, I will just send it on to the DHCP server to take care of that for you. So when the client, the DHCP client is set up, and it will ask, where do I get the information from? It will send out these information, and the router will answer back whether it's option 1, 2, or 3 that is set up. So if I want to use a stateless DHCP, well, then, for instance, if I want the DHCP server on the router to handle the DNS server and the domain name, well, then again I go into my config mode and I use the IPv6 DHCP pool IPv6 stateless, saying the only thing here I will give out to my clients are the DNS and the domain name. And then I will set the N and D flag so that it will know that it will use the stateless option. The other thing that I can do, and then if I want my interfaces to get information from this, I will use the IPv6 address autoconfig, not DHCP in this case, but autoconfig when I'm using a stateless DHCP. And to verify it, I will can use the show IPv6 DHCP pool, and then the pool will tell us that this is stateless. So stateless when I want only to hand out not the IP address itself, but all the other information from the DHCP server. Here, if I want to use a stateful, that means that this will work as DHCP for version 4, which will hand out the entire network configuration to the clients, both the IP address, but all the other things as well. So here it's set up more or less the same way as in version 4, where we go in and say IPv6 DHCP pool, and then the pool name. We tell the IP address, the time that we will have it, the lease time. We will give the DNS server, the domain name, and other things. And then we will configure it to be given to a certain interface. And to verify it and see it, you can see the commands here. So this will then tell us, if you do a show IPv6 DHCP, we will see that it is now a stateful. Stateful meaning that we will hand out everything, also the IP address. And if I want another router to get information from this router, well, then I use the IPv6 address DHCP. This means that it will given the entire information from the DHCP server and not from anything else. So to verify it, again, show IPv6 DHCP pool, and we can see the bindings with the MAC addresses and the IP addresses that we have handed out. And show IPv6 interfaces, you will also be able to see the IP addresses that have obtained automatically, and the default gateway and whatever information that we are getting. Also here we can have the option where we have a lot of different segments on our network, and we need the relay agents to be set up to catch the DHCP requests on one interface and hand them over to another interface where we have our DHCP server. So the command here is IPv6 DHCP relay destination, and the destination is the IPv6 address of our DHCP server. And we will put this onto the interface where we don't have the IPv6 DHCP server present. More or less the same thing. So what can go wrong? Well, when we're working with IPv6, a lot can go wrong, but here the same thing as on IPv4. We need to make sure that we don't have any address conflicts. We need to be aware of what kind of a method we use, whether the SLAAC or the stateless or stateful DHCP version 6. And then we need to, of course, verify the ports and everything is that we actually have a connection and the different VLANs that we are having. Yep. So we will then be able to see what kind of an setup that we are using to verify it. We can also debug if we have problems with IP version or DHCP version 6. Yeah. So that was it. Thank you.